Now we're going to conduct an overview of our research because the purpose of this presentation is an overview of our research, kind of a summation, where we see police departments today, particularly with their training, and police officers today, and where we think we need to go in the next major step of police training. So our goal is kind of to sum up our research and then to look at the implications, the so what of all of that research. Now we know that it doesn't matter what the tool is, whether it's language or a deadly force instrument or an automobile or an impact weapon, that officer performance in a crisis is very, very similar. So it applies to language as well as to deadly force issues. We've researched language. We look at, in particular, the psycholinguistics of deadly force encounters. We have 2 studies on those. And the result of those 2 studies, that officers for most situations, most of the time, when they are persuading, trying to gain cooperation, ordering people, they use alpha commands or alpha language. Now, it could be very evoking cooperation, such as, "Sir, would you please?" But nonetheless, it is an alpha command style. So officers would say, "Sir, I'd like to see your driver's license. Please now." But as soon as officers began to enter situations in which they appeared to lose control, or they felt they were losing control, their commands became beta commands, and they were less meaningful to the people involved, to the people involved in the situation. We have 2 publications on that if you're interested in that research, but it certainly applies to, our research applies right across the spectrum, whether it's a language or deadly force issues, but we have studied that whole spectrum, primarily with the cooperation of Dr. Houlihan and Dr. Buchanan, and a variety of other graduate students, but we have studied that fairly extensively and are continuing research in communication and problem solving and persuasion elements dealing with officers in critical incidents. We've looked at memory, and we'll come back to this. But our study in exhaustion and performance in exhaustion, we've looked at particularly focused attention, and focused attention in a force situation, and the level of impact that focused attention has on officers' memory for before, something occurring before, something that is occurring during that level of intense focus, and something that happens after that level of intense focus. So we have tested that. We have a publication on that in the Psychological Science Journal. There's a presentation from the Canadian Discovery Channel up on our website if you're interested further in that. But what is very clear is that focused attention, selective attention on a particular element, whether it's the use of the tool, an officer's response, whether the officer is focused externally on the person they're trying to persuade or gain the cooperation of or stop the threat from, regardless, once an officer selectively attends to something, their ability to remember other elements is significantly impaired. As an aside, we got into a shell casing ejection study. Just because an individual handling a tool has an effect on how that tool operates. Now, in the world of forensic crime scene reconstruction, up until we did our study, the vast majority of experts in the area, forensic experts, people from the firearms and tool mark specialists associations, organizations, these individuals always contended that guns ejected shell casings, semi-automatic handguns, ejected shell casings to the right and to the rear. Well, we knew from the time we've spent on the range since the 60s that shell casings eject from semi-automatic handguns based on how the handgun is held and manipulated. So we certainly challenged the forensic science experts, and we'll just show you an illustration. Here's an officer with firing a semi-automatic handgun, 9mm. The gun is canted slightly downward and at about 45 degrees to the left, but the object you see in the screen in the upper left is the ejected cartridge casing, which has left that gun to the left and front and not to the right and rear. And so our conclusion is that if a handgun is fired in an area The handgun will eject from the gun based on how the gun is held and manipulated. And if you attempt to reconstruct where an officer stood or fired from, or the direction in which they fired from, that you need to know how the gun was held and manipulated. Otherwise, the only conclusion you can draw is that a gun was fired from somewhere within this area. We have a publication on that in the Investigative Sciences Journal. If you're interested, that's also up on our website.